In the quiet town of Maplewood, Oregon, the haunting melody of a lost child's violin still lingered in the hearts of those she left behind. For 15 years, Mary Carter carried the weight of her daughter Emily's disappearance, an unending ache that time could not soothe. But when a hidden message emerges from the dusty shadows of an old attic, the past begins to whisper its secrets once more. Join us as we step into the delicate dance of memory and music, of love twisted into obsession, and of one mother's unwavering determination to bring her child home. This is the story of a lost song, a stolen childhood, and the unbreakable bond that would not be silenced. The rain had long since stopped falling over Maplewood, Oregon, but the sky remained a bruised, melancholic gray. The streets glistened in the soft light of dusk, reflecting the quiet resolve of the small town, as if the clouds themselves were reluctant to let go of their grief. In the heart of this silence, Mary Carter stood at the base of her attic stairs, one hand resting on the chipped wooden banister as she braced herself for the climb. The weight of 15 years pressed down on her shoulders like an invisible shroud. She drew a slow breath, her eyes traveling over the familiar landscape of cardboard boxes stacked high against the hallway walls, each one carefully labeled for their impending move across the country. But tonight, as the last night in the house she'd once filled with laughter and lullabies, something deeper than nostalgia stirred inside her. A part of her had never stopped waiting in this house. A part of her still believed that somewhere behind the cobwebbed corners of these walls lay the final note of a song unfinished. Behind her, Daniel Carter's voice reached her in that gentle, grounding way he'd perfected over the years. "Mary," he said softly, his phone pressed to his ear. "The moving company confirmed for tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained fixed on the attic door above. She could feel the memories waiting, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat in the dark. When she finally climbed those creaking stairs, each step felt like stepping back into the night of the spring concert, the night Emily vanished. Emily Carter had been 12 years old then, her hair tied in a neat braid, the violin case clutched against her chest like a shield. She'd been so excited, her bright eyes shining as she walked on stage. And after the music, after the applause, nothing. Silence. No one saw her leave, and no one ever saw her again. The attic door groaned open under Mary's hand, releasing a sigh of stale air that smelled of mothballs and old wood. Dust motes danced in the beam of light from the bare bulb overhead. She stepped into the cramped space, her fingers brushing across forgotten relics, holiday wreaths, a broken sled, stacks of yellowed newspapers. Daniel followed her in, ending his call and slipping the phone into his pocket. He rested a hand on her shoulder, a silent promise that they'd leave these ghosts behind once and for all. 15 years, she whispered to herself, her voice almost lost beneath the low hum of the wind outside. 15 years since Emily disappeared. Daniel squeezed her shoulder gently. "That's why we're doing this, Mary," he murmured. "A fresh start. Oregon will be good for us." She nodded, though her heart felt as fragile as the dust-laden beams above them. She wanted to believe that leaving Maplewood would finally set her free, but the question of what happened to Emily still clung to her soul like a burr. Mary crossed the attic, her footfalls muffled on the wooden floorboards. She reached for a box labeled Christmas, pulling it open to reveal a tangle of old tinsel and faded ornaments. She barely noticed the glitter of them. Her mind was elsewhere, haunted by a melody she could almost hear, a faint echo of Emily's violin that had never truly stopped. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, they would leave. But tonight, in this quiet attic full of memories, she felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't dared to name in years. Hope. The violin waited in the corner, cloaked in a veil of cobwebs, and somewhere deep inside her, a small voice whispered that this night was not meant to end in silence. Daniel moved to the far end of the attic, carefully lifting aside a battered suitcase to clear a path through the maze of memories. His voice was calm, almost casual, as he began to sort through an old box of Christmas decorations, the same box they hadn't opened since Emily's disappearance. Mary watched him from across the attic, her fingers tracing the edges of a dusty photo album. The cracked leather cover felt strangely cold beneath her touch. She lifted the album and opened it, revealing black and white snapshots of Emily's childhood, her bright eyes shining as she posed with her violin, her gap-toothed smile as she learned to ride a bicycle. Each photograph was a frozen fragment of a life that had been stolen, a testament to a daughter who had once filled their home with laughter and music. The weight of those memories pressed down on Mary's chest, threatening to steal her breath. "Mary," Daniel said gently, breaking the silence, "look at this." He was pointing to a corner of the attic, where a wooden violin case sat half hidden beneath a blanket of spiderwebs. For a moment, Mary couldn't move. Her heart stuttered in her chest, and a shiver ran down her spine. "It's Emily's first violin," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Not the one she played at recitals, but the very first one we bought for her." She remembered the excitement in Emily's eyes when she'd pulled the bow across the strings for the first time, the squeaky notes that had filled the living room with innocent wonder. Daniel walked over and carefully lifted the instrument, cradling it in his hands as if it were something sacred. "I remember buying this for her," he said, his voice low. "We didn't know if she'd stick with it, but she did. By the time she was 9, she was already playing at competitions." Mary nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "And then she graduated to the professional violin, the one that vanished with her that night." The words felt like a blade, reopening an old wound that had never fully healed. Daniel moved to place the violin back in its case, but as he lifted it, he paused, frowning. A faint rattling sound echoed from within the hollow wooden body. He tilted the instrument gently, and the sound came again, a soft but insistent rattle, as if the violin itself was whispering secrets long buried. "That's odd," he murmured, shaking the instrument lightly. "There's something inside." Mary's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel's eyes were fixed on the violin's narrow F-holes, but he couldn't see clearly into the darkness within. "I don't know," he said slowly, his brow furrowing. "But it's something. I think I need to open it." Mary felt a surge of panic. "Daniel, no. That violin, it's Emily's. It's a memory. We can't just break it open." But Daniel's eyes were resolute. "Mary, what if whatever's inside can tell us something? What if it's important?" He crossed the attic to the old toolbox, pulling out a slender pry bar and a small hammer. Mary's pulse quickened as she watched him, torn between fear and the desperate hope that had lived in her heart for 15 long years. "Please, Daniel," she whispered, "be careful." He nodded and knelt down beside the violin, his hands steady. The old glue had weakened over the years, and the thin wood gave way with a soft crack as he pried the top plate loose. Dust rose in a shimmering cloud, and then Daniel reached inside, his fingers brushing against something smooth and foreign. He pulled out 3 envelopes, each one yellowed with age and bearing a name written in a careful hand. Emily Carter. Mary gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. The attic seemed to go still around them, the air thick with the weight of what they had just uncovered. "What are those?" she whispered, her voice hoarse with wonder and dread. Daniel didn't answer. He opened the first envelope with trembling fingers, and the words that spilled out were like a ghost's song, a voice from the past reaching out across the darkness. "My dearest Emily," he read aloud, his voice shaking. "When you play your violin, the world stops spinning. Your music fills my heart with a joy I've never known before." The letters were love letters, pages and pages of tender words, each one ending the same way, with the word love and a small hand-drawn symbol of a heart intertwined with a rose. Mary felt a sob rise in her throat. Their daughter had been only 12 years old, and yet here were the words of someone who claimed to love her, someone who had hidden these letters inside the violin that had once been her dearest possession. The attic felt colder now, the secrets it had guarded for so long finally laid bare. In that moment, Mary knew with a certainty that both terrified and strengthened her. This was the first step to uncovering the truth, and she was ready to follow that path, no matter where it led. The letters lay in Mary's hands, the paper soft and fragile from years spent sealed away. She felt the ink beneath her fingertips, still dark and elegant after all this time. Daniel watched her closely, his face pale in the dusty light of the attic. He reached for one of the letters and read the last line aloud, his voice faltering as he spoke the final word, love, as if the word itself were an accusation. Mary's mind raced. Emily, their sweet, bright-eyed girl, had been only 12 when she vanished. What kind of secret life had she been leading? Who had written these letters, these beautiful, poetic words that seemed too mature for a child's world? Her thoughts tangled like the cobwebs in the rafters, each question pulling her deeper into the shadows of that attic. Mary, Daniel said softly, breaking through her haze. I don't understand. She was so young. These words, they're not something a child writes or receives lightly. Mary's breath hitched. She looked at her husband, his brow furrowed in confusion, and knew they were both grappling with the same fear. Daniel, she said quietly, her voice a whisper of dread. What if the boy who wrote these letters had something to do with her disappearance? Daniel's jaw tightened. Let's not jump to conclusions, he said, though the strain in his voice betrayed his unease. These could be harmless, someone her own age, maybe another student. Maybe it was just innocent, even if it was a secret. But Mary wasn't so sure. She thought of the final night they'd seen Emily, her laughter bright as she played her violin for the last time, then the sudden silence, the empty stage, the long, empty years that followed. Her heart told her there were no more innocent explanations. Mary carefully folded the letters and slid them back into the envelopes. I have to tell Detective O'Connor, she said firmly, her voice shaking but resolute. He needs to see these. Maybe they'll lead us somewhere new. Daniel hesitated, his expression one of quiet concern. Are you sure he'll take it seriously? After all these years, he's lost faith in finding her. He might see this as nothing more than teenage nonsense. Mary met his eyes, determination sharpening her features. It doesn't matter what he thinks. This is the first real clue we've had in 15 years. I won't let him ignore it. Without waiting for Daniel to respond, she turned and descended the attic stairs, each step echoing like a heartbeat in her ears. The musty air of the attic gave way to the crisp evening chill of their living room. Mary felt the change like a shock to her system, her senses suddenly alive with the weight of the secret she carried. She walked to the phone on the wall, her fingers trembling as she dialed the familiar number. The line rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Detective James O'Connor. Detective, Mary said quickly, her voice steady despite the rush of fear in her chest. This is Mary Carter. I think I've found something. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the silence stretching thin as the detective processed her words. Mrs. Carter, he said finally, his tone carefully neutral. What have you found? Mary swallowed hard. Letters, hidden inside Emily's old violin. They're love letters, detective. Beautifully written, but they feel wrong. She was 12. These aren't childish notes. Another pause, then a long sigh. Mrs. Carter, teenagers hide letters all the time. Unless there's something directly threatening in them, I'm not sure how they help us. Mary's heart sank at the dismissal in his voice. Please, she said, her voice cracking. Don't brush this aside. These letters, they're different. There's a symbol, a heart with a rose, like a signature. It might be important. Detective O'Connor was silent for a moment longer. Then, finally, he said, Bring them to the station, Mrs. Carter. I'll take a look. But don't get your hopes up. The line went dead. Mary stood there for a moment, the receiver heavy in her hand, her reflection pale and resolute in the window beside her. She felt Daniel's presence behind her, his quiet strength a balm against the cold tide of uncertainty that threatened to drown her. I'll take them in first thing tomorrow, she said softly, turning to face him. No matter what he thinks, I won't let this go. Daniel nodded, but his eyes were shadowed. I'll help you pack the rest of the boxes tonight. We'll leave this place behind tomorrow, but we'll leave knowing we've done everything we can. Mary looked down at the letters once more, the edges worn, the inked hearts twining with roses, as if to guard their secrets. Somewhere inside those pages, she felt certain, lay the key to everything. And she would find it. The morning sun rose over Maplewood with a pale, hesitant glow, painting the Carter family home in watery gold. Mary had barely slept, her mind caught in the looping script of those letters, the same words replaying over and over like a broken record. When you play your violin, the world stops spinning. Each word was a door she couldn't help but open, and each door led her back to Emily. As she packed the last of the photo albums into cardboard boxes, her hands moved on autopilot, but her thoughts were fixed on the station and the cold, indifferent voice of Detective O'Connor. Would he really take the letters seriously? Or would he dismiss them as the harmless imaginings of a love-struck child? Mary couldn't shake the feeling that these letters were anything but harmless. Daniel emerged from the kitchen, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. You didn't sleep, he said softly, his eyes taking in the worry lines on her face. Mary managed a tight smile, though it felt as fragile as the porcelain mug she accepted from him. "How could I?" she murmured. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. And those letters." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He understood. In his own quiet way, he was as haunted as she was. "I'll come with you," he said. "We'll go together." Mary shook her head. "I need you here to finish the packing. We can't afford to put it off any longer. I'll go to the station and show them the letters. If they won't listen, then I'll find someone who will." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but be careful, Mary. Don't let this consume you." She reached out and squeezed his hand, a silent promise that she would try. But in her heart, she knew she was already in too deep. She had been for 15 years. As she gathered the letters and tucked them carefully into her purse, Mary caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her face looked older than she remembered, the lines around her eyes deeper, her hair streaked with silver. She wore a faded green dress that Emily had once called her garden fairy dress. And for a moment, Mary's throat tightened. She hadn't worn it in years, but today it felt right. As if, somehow, it might carry a piece of Emily with her into the cold walls of the police station. She slipped on her coat and stepped out into the brisk spring morning. The air smelled of rain and pine needles, and the wind stirred her hair as she made her way down the driveway to the car. The engine coughed to life beneath her hands, the old Volvo rumbling in protest. But she ignored it, focusing instead on the weight of the letters in her bag, the sense that they were more than just paper and ink. They were a lifeline. Driving through the familiar streets of Maplewood, Mary felt the past pressing close around her. Every street sign, every worn sidewalk crack was a memory of Emily, of laughter echoing off the brick walls of the music academy, of walks home from the corner store with a violin case bumping against her daughter's knees. She approached a red light at Maple Street and reached for one of the letters, her fingers tracing the elegant handwriting as if by touching the words she could somehow reach across the years. "My beloved Emily," the letter read, "your music is the light in my darkness." Mary's breath caught. Who could have written these words to a 12-year-old girl? And why had he never come forward when she disappeared? The light turned green, and she carefully tucked the letter back into her purse. Ahead, the old music academy loomed, its freshly painted doors a stark contrast to the memories that lingered there. She felt an instinct she couldn't explain, an urge to stop, to ask questions, to find the ghosts that still haunted its practice rooms. Mary turned into the parking lot, her heart pounding. She thought of Victor Lane, the violin teacher who had once praised Emily's talent with a smile that now seemed too polished, too perfect. She wondered what he might remember, what he might be hiding behind those polite words and that impeccable reputation. She stepped out of the car, the letters a comforting weight against her side. Today wasn't about memories. Today was about answers, and Mary Carter was ready to demand them. The Music Academy's lobby was quiet, bathed in the pale morning light filtering through tall windows. Mary stepped inside, the familiar scent of polished wood and rosin stirring memories she'd tried for years to bury. Her footsteps echoed on the gleaming floor as she approached the front desk, where a young receptionist with auburn hair looked up with a warm, professional smile. "Good morning," the woman said. "How can I help you?" Mary's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. "I'm here to see Victor Lane," she said. "He taught my daughter, Emily Carter, many years ago." Recognition flickered in the woman's eyes. "Mr. Lane is in session right now," she said, her tone polite. "But his class should end in about 10 minutes. Would you like to wait in the hallway?" Mary nodded, though her throat felt tight. She followed the receptionist down a corridor lined with practice rooms, the faint sounds of piano scales and string quartets seeping through the doors like ghosts of the past. They stopped outside room 12, and the receptionist gestured to a row of chairs. "He'll be right out," she said kindly, then turned and walked away, leaving Mary alone with her thoughts. She sat, but the restlessness in her bones wouldn't let her stay still. She rose almost immediately, pacing the narrow hallway as her mind churned with questions. Her hand drifted to her purse, the letters inside like a heartbeat against her side. Unable to resist, she peered through the small window in the door. Inside, she saw Victor Lane standing tall and composed, his silver hair catching the light as he spoke to a teenage girl carefully packing her violin away. Mary's breath caught, the gentle hand he rested on the girl's shoulder, the soft, reassuring words she couldn't quite make out. It was the same paternal gesture he had used with Emily so many years ago. The door opened suddenly, and the girl, no more than 16, emerged, her cello case clutched to her chest. Her expression was tense, her eyes shadowed, and Mary's heart twisted at the sight. Victor followed her out, his hand lingering on her shoulder a moment longer before he let her go. "Only read the report when you get home," he said quietly, his voice too soft for Mary to hear clearly. The girl nodded stiffly and walked away, disappearing down the corridor. Then Victor's gaze fell on Mary, and for a moment, the polished mask of his face slipped. Surprise flickered across his features, quickly replaced by a smooth, practiced smile. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice as warm and polite as ever. "It's been a long time. How can I help you?" Mary stood a little straighter, her voice calm, but her hands trembling slightly. "I found something in Emily's old violin," she said, her words measured. "Letters. Love letters, written to her when she was 12. Victor's eyebrows lifted, his expression carefully neutral. "Love letters?" he repeated softly. "May I see them?" Mary hesitated, then reached into her purse and handed him one of the envelopes. He took it with a delicate touch, unfolding the paper and reading silently. The lines of his face remained unchanged, but Mary's gaze was sharp, searching for the smallest sign, a flicker of recognition, a shadow of guilt. After a long moment, he folded the letter again and handed it back. "I'm afraid I don't remember her being close to any boys," he said slowly, his voice almost regretful. "Most of her friends were girls, and she was always so focused on her music." Mary's eyes narrowed. "You must have noticed something," she pressed. "She spent so much time here. If there was someone older, someone who took an interest in her." Victor shook his head, his smile sad and patient. "Mrs. Carter, it was so long ago. The details blur with time. Emily was a bright student, but I don't recall anything unusual." Mary's heart sank, but she refused to let her frustration show. "Do you know if she spent time with any boys from the neighboring school?" she asked, her voice firm. "I heard they sometimes practiced together after classes." Victor hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "It's possible," he said. "The boys' and girls' schools were close, and they did socialize after hours. But I can't say for sure." Mary felt a spark of something, hope or fear, she couldn't tell. She opened her mouth to ask another question, but Victor glanced at his watch and cut her off gently. "I'm so sorry, but I have a flight to catch later this afternoon," he said, his tone apologetic. "A small performance out of town. Perhaps we can speak more another time." Mary forced a smile, though her mind was already racing. "Of course," she said softly. "Thank you for your time." As Victor turned back into the classroom, Mary was left standing alone in the hallway, the letters clutched tight against her chest. She had come here for answers, but all she had found were more questions, and the lingering sense that Victor Lane knew far more than he was willing to admit. Mary stepped back from the door, her heart still pounding from the encounter. Victor's measured words and polite tone did little to ease the chill that had settled deep in her chest. She turned and began walking slowly down the hallway, the letters in her purse feeling heavier with every step. Her mind buzzed with questions. If Victor truly had nothing to hide, why did his eyes dart away when she mentioned boys from the neighboring school? Why did he rush to end the conversation? As she passed the front desk, she noticed the girl from earlier, Lily Reed, the teenager with the sad eyes, sitting in the lobby. She was hunched over, a crisp white envelope resting on her lap. Mary's breath caught. The envelope was new, stamped with the Music Academy's crest in gold foil, so different from the aged letters she held. But the way Lily held it, so tightly her knuckles whitened, told Mary it carried weight of its own. Mary hesitated. She wanted to ask Lily about the letter, about Victor's quiet command to read it only at home, but she forced herself to stop. She knew the look of someone who had been pressed too hard, too often. She'd seen it in her own reflection too many times. Instead, she turned back to the receptionist, her voice low and steady. "I was wondering, could you tell me who shared classes with Emily Carter back in 1975? She asked. "I know it was a long time ago, but any names you remember could help." The receptionist's face softened. "Of course, Mrs. Carter. Let me check our records." She typed quickly on her computer, the clicking of keys blending with the distant music drifting from the practice rooms. While she waited, Mary's gaze drifted back to Lily. The girl was now reading the card tucked inside the envelope, her eyes wide and unblinking. She looked haunted. The receptionist spoke again, drawing Mary's attention back. I found a record of 2 students, Francesca Chan and Timothy Picoult, she said. They were in the same classes as your daughter. Mary's breath quickened. She recognized Timothy's name immediately. She remembered the police had spoken to him years ago. He'd been ruled out, a nervous boy who had grown into a nervous man, no threat. But Francesca, that name was new. Thank you, Mary said, her voice hushed with relief. You've been very kind. The receptionist gave her a warm smile. We all remember Emily, she said softly. She was such a bright light here. I hope you find what you're looking for. Mary nodded and stepped away from the desk, her mind whirling with the new names and the image of Lily's pale face. As she pushed through the academy's doors and into the bright morning light, she felt the cold air bite at her cheeks. She paused, drawing in a long breath as she glanced back at the old brick building. She didn't know what Victor was hiding, but she knew in her bones that the key lay somewhere between the lines of those letters, those old, faded declarations of love that now felt like the bars of a cage. She needed answers, and she was willing to go wherever the shadows of Emily's past led her. Mary's mind churned as she left the academy, the faint strains of a violin following her out like a ghost. She had parked her car near the edge of the lot, a few spaces down from the main entrance. As she approached, she caught sight of a sleek black Mercedes pulling up to the curb. The car idled for a moment before a man in an expensive suit stepped out, his face tight with irritation. Mary recognized him immediately. It was Lily's father, his features sharp and his posture rigid with the kind of anger that simmers just below the surface. He stalked over to where Lily still sat, the envelope now clutched tightly in her lap. "Grace!" he barked, his voice slicing through the quiet morning air. "What's that you're reading?" Mary watched as Lily flinched, shoving the letter back into the envelope. She stood, her shoulders hunched in a silent apology as she handed it to him. He snatched it from her hands, tearing it open and scanning the contents with a scowl. Whatever was written there, it clearly fueled the storm that darkened his expression even further. Mary's pulse quickened. She couldn't hear the words, but she could feel the heat of his fury. With a snarl, he crumpled the envelope and card into a tight fist and tossed them into the nearby waste bin. "Let's go," he snapped, his hand clamping down on Lily's arm like a vice. He marched her toward the car, not sparing Mary, or anyone else, a second glance. For a moment, Mary stood frozen, her hand resting on the roof of her old Volvo. The scene had cracked something open in her, an understanding of just how deep this web of control might go. She glanced around the parking lot, her breath coming in shallow pulls. No one seemed to notice, or if they did, they pretended not to. When the Mercedes pulled away, Mary moved without thinking. She crossed the small patch of grass and reached into the waste bin. Her fingers brushed against the crumpled envelope, still warm from the father's grip. She pulled it out, unfolding it with careful fingers. The envelope was addressed to Grace W. Reed, typed in a clean, precise font. The card inside was equally formal, a progress report from the Music Academy. At first glance, it was unremarkable, a list of technical critiques and recommendations for further study. But as Mary read it, her heart clenched. The language was harsh, each word dripping with judgment. Grace's bow control remains weak, lacks discipline in upper registers, not yet prepared for level 7. Mary swallowed, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. No wonder the girl had looked so defeated. No wonder her father's rage had been so sharp. She could almost feel the weight of it pressing down on Grace's slender shoulders, the impossible burden of perfection. She was about to slip the card back into the envelope when her gaze caught on something in the corner of the page, a small stamp, the size of a quarter, pressed into the paper in a pale, almost translucent ink. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a heart, twined with a rose, exactly like the one on Emily's letters. Mary's hands trembled. She looked up, the parking lot around her suddenly too quiet, too still. She clutched the card to her chest, a sick certainty pooling in her gut. This wasn't just a coincidence. Victor Lane was using the same symbol, the same haunting mark that had been hidden away in Emily's violin for 15 years. She turned back toward her car, the weight of the card pressing against her ribs like a warning. She didn't know what she would do next, but one thing was clear. Victor Lane wasn't just a teacher. He was a keeper of secrets, and perhaps a thief of childhoods. Mary sat in her car, the crumpled card clutched tight in her hand. The symbol, heart and rose intertwined, seemed to glow in her mind, its delicate lines a brand of something dark and hidden. She couldn't tear her eyes away. Her breath fogged the windshield, but she barely noticed. All she could see was Emily's sweet face and the pale echo of that symbol, the same mark of a love that had stolen her away. She fumbled through her purse, her fingers closing around the small UV pen she'd found in an old toolbox the night before. The pen had been a curiosity then, a leftover from Daniel's tinkering days. Now it felt like a key. She twisted it on, a soft violet light flickering to life. She held the card under its glow, her breath catching as faint words began to appear on the back of the report card, ghostly shapes emerging from the blank paper. The script was small, almost delicate, but unmistakable. They see a student. I see my star, my daughter of sound. Come and we'll shine together, my love. Below it, the same heart and rose symbol, drawn in the same careful, deliberate hand she'd seen in Emily's letters. Mary's heart raced. The words were twisted, possessive, a promise of devotion that felt like a noose. She forced herself to read them again, each letter a nail driven deeper into her chest. This wasn't a love letter. It was a claim, a vow. She realized with a shudder that whoever had written those letters to Emily 15 years ago was still writing them now, to other girls, using the same words, the same symbol. The memory of Victor's calm smile in the academy hallway turned to ice in her mind. He had looked at her with such measured politeness, but beneath that civility she saw it now, a man who had never let go of his obsession. And Lily, she was just the newest daughter of sound, trapped in the same gilded cage. Mary pressed the card to her chest, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She had to act, and she had to act quickly. She started the engine, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She would go back to the academy. She would confront Victor Lane if she had to, and if the police wouldn't help, she would find another way. She pulled out of the lot, her mind a storm of memory and fear. Maplewood's quiet streets blurred past her, each turn bringing her closer to something she could feel, some final truth hidden in the music that had once been Emily's greatest joy. As she drove, she forced herself to remember Emily's laughter, the way she would practice scales for hours until her fingers ached, the way her music had once filled this small town with hope. Mary clung to that memory, even as she prepared to dive deeper into a darkness she had only begun to understand. The academy rose up before her again, as imposing as a cathedral. She parked the car and stepped out, the card still clutched in her hand. She would not let fear stop her. She would not let Victor Lane's polite lies silence the truth. The echoes of her daughter's violin still rang in her heart, and she would follow them wherever they led. Mary gripped the steering wheel tighter as she drove, her mind still swirling with the hidden message she'd found. She could feel the weight of those words pressing into her chest, each letter a cold hand on her heart. She turned off the main road, weaving through the narrow streets of Maplewood as she tried to decide what to do next. She needed to confront Victor Lane. She needed to know if he was the same twisted soul who had stolen her daughter all those years ago. But as she passed Millwood Park, a small patch of green that had once been Emily's favorite spot, she caught a glimpse that made her blood run cold. Sitting on a swing, her violin case propped against her knee, was Lily, alone. Playing softly, the notes of Bach's Suite No. 1 drifting across the empty playground. Mary pulled over, her hands trembling as she turned off the car. She watched for a moment, her throat tightening. Lily's playing was beautiful, aching and mournful, each note like a cry for help. Mary could see the tension in the girl's shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the bow too tightly, as if she were fighting to hold on to something that was already slipping away. She stepped out of the car and walked across the grass, the wet earth soft beneath her feet. Lily didn't look up as she approached, her eyes fixed on the strings of her violin, her face set in a mask of concentration. But when Mary stopped a few feet away, the music faltered. Lily's bow stilled, and she lifted her head, her dark eyes wary. "Why are you following me?" Lily's voice was flat, edged with a weariness that didn't belong to someone her age. She hugged the violin case to her chest, her fingers white against the worn leather. "I'm not following you," Mary said softly, choosing her words with care. "I saw you at the academy earlier, and I saw how your father treated you. I know there's something wrong, Lily. I can see it in your eyes." Lily's lips tightened, her gaze sliding away. "You don't know anything about me," she muttered. Mary took a careful step closer, her voice gentle but unyielding. "I know about Victor Lane," she said. "I know he gave you that card, the one with the same symbol as the letters I found in my daughter's violin. I know he's been grooming you, just like he did to Emily." Lily's breath caught, and she looked up sharply. For a moment, something like fear flashed across her face. But then she swallowed it down, her expression hardening. "You're crazy," she said, but her voice was too thin, too brittle. "Victor is just my teacher. He's helping me become a better musician." Mary shook her head. "No, Lily, he's not helping you. He's trying to control you. I know what it's like. I know how it feels to have your life taken over by someone who pretends it's all for your own good." The girl's shoulders slumped, and she let out a ragged sigh. "He says I'm special," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He says I'm his daughter of sound, like I'm part of something bigger than myself. My father, he wants me to succeed so badly, and Victor, he promised he could make me better. He promised." Her voice trailed off, and she bowed her head, her hair falling forward to hide her face. Mary reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this, Lily," she said softly. "You don't have to let him take you down the same path he took Emily. You can say no, you can walk away." For a moment, Lily didn't move. Then she lifted her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I'm so tired of trying to be perfect." Mary's heart ached at the brokenness in her voice. She squeezed the girl's shoulder gently. "You don't have to be perfect, Lily. You just have to be yourself. That's enough." She reached into her purse and pulled out the crumpled report card, holding it out to Lily. "I found this in the trash after your father threw it away," she said. "Look at the stamp, Lily. It's the same symbol from the letters. It's not just about music, it's about control. You have to see that." Lily took the card with trembling hands, her eyes widening as she saw the faint, ghostly stamp in the corner. She traced it with her fingertip, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "I don't want this," she said hoarsely. "I don't want to be his puppet anymore." Mary nodded. "Then let me help you," she said, her voice firm. "We'll go together. We'll confront him, and we'll make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else ever again." For a long moment, Lily was silent. Then she drew a shuddering breath and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's finish this." The address Victor had given Lily echoed in Mary's mind as she navigated the winding streets that led away from the familiar heart of Maplewood. The houses grew larger here, old trees arching overhead like silent witnesses. Lily sat beside her in the car, her violin case clutched in her lap like a talisman, her face pale but resolute. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mary asked quietly, her fingers tightening on the wheel. "Once we're there, there's no going back. Whatever we find, we'll have to face it together." Lily's gaze was fixed out the window, the fleeting glimpses of the world outside almost too bright against the gathering darkness in her eyes. "I need to know," she said, her voice small but unyielding. "I need to see it for myself." Mary nodded, though her own heart thundered in her chest. She remembered Victor's polished smile, the careful control in his every word. She thought of Emily, so young and full of music, and how Victor had twisted that joy into a prison. As they turned onto a narrow tree-lined drive, the house came into view, a sprawling villa set back from the road, its stone walls cloaked in ivy. A silver BMW was parked in the driveway, glinting in the afternoon light. Mary's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "He's here," she said softly. Lily swallowed hard. "He said I could come any time," she murmured, "that he was always ready to help me. Become something more." Mary reached over and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "I'm here with you. We'll face him together." They stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel underfoot sharp in the quiet air. From somewhere inside the villa, the sound of a cello drifted out, haunting, improvised flourishes that made Mary's breath catch. She knew that melody. Emily had played it over and over in their living room, filling the house with light and laughter. Hearing it now, in this place, it felt like a plea. Lily walked up to the heavy wooden door and knocked. A long moment passed before it swung open, revealing a middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's uniform. Her dark eyes flickered with confusion as she took in Mary and Lily standing there. "We're not expecting anyone," she said softly, her voice carrying a faint accent. Behind her, Victor's tall figure appeared, his face shadowed by the dim light. For a heartbeat, Surprise flickered across his features, quickly replaced by a calm, measured smile. "Lily," he said, his voice smooth and warm. "And Mrs. Carter. What an unexpected visit. Please come in." Mary hesitated, every instinct in her screaming to turn and run, but she forced herself to step forward, her heart pounding in her ears. Victor stepped back to let them enter, the door closing behind them with a soft click that sounded far too final. He led them down a narrow hallway lined with photographs, young musicians, all girls, holding violins and cellos, their faces lit with shy pride. Mary's stomach turned. She recognized that look in their eyes, the promise of something more, something grand. Victor paused at the end of the hall, turning to face them. "Lily," he said softly, his eyes kind, his voice full of gentle authority. "I'm glad you decided to come. You've always had such potential. I knew you'd see that in time." Lily swallowed hard, her hand tightening on her violin case. I don't know if I'm ready," she said, her voice trembling. Victor smiled, stepping closer. "Nonsense," he said. "You're ready. You just need someone to help you find the courage to step into the light." His gaze shifted to Mary, lingering for a beat too long. "And Mrs. Carter. What brings you here? Surely you're not still chasing ghosts after all these years." Mary drew a deep breath, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I came for answers," she said. "I came to find the truth about what happened to my daughter, and to make sure it never happens to anyone else." For a moment, Victor's expression darkened, a shadow passing over his eyes. But then he smiled again, that same calm, practiced smile. "Of course," he said. "But first, let's sit down. We can discuss everything. In time." He turned and opened a door to a small, comfortable room, a waiting area with soft chairs and a low table stacked with music journals. As Mary and Lily stepped inside, Victor closed the door behind them, the quiet click echoing like a promise. Mary felt the weight of it settle over her like a shroud. She knew in that moment that they were closer to the truth than ever before, and that Victor Lane's polite facade was only a mask for something far darker. The door to the waiting room closed with a soft but final click that seemed to echo in Mary's bones. She could feel the weight of the silence pressing in around her as she sat down next to Lily on the small couch. The walls were lined with more photographs, Victor in tuxedos, beaming beside wide-eyed young girls in recital dresses, a shrine to his carefully constructed image. Mary's pulse quickened. She glanced at Lily, who stared down at the floor, her fingers twisting the strap of her violin case. The girl's shoulders were tense, her breath shallow. Mary reached out and rested a hand on hers, grounding her in the moment. "We're together in this," she whispered. Lily nodded, though her lips remained pressed in a thin line. On the low table before them sat a stack of music journals, each one meticulously arranged, a careful display of prestige and control. Mary's gaze drifted across them, her thoughts a whirl of memory and fear. She could feel the ghost of Emily's music in the room, the faint echo of a violin lost to time, but not to memory. Lily's eyes darted around the room, landing on something that made her breath hitch. She leaned forward and pulled a small pen from the creases of the couch, its body sleek and metallic, the cap twisted askew. Recognition flashed in Mary's mind. It was the same ultraviolet pen she had used to reveal the hidden words on Lily's report card. Mary's heart began to pound. She took the pen from Lily's hand, her fingers trembling as she clicked it on. The soft purple glow cast long shadows in the small room. She turned to Lily, her voice low and urgent. "Let me see your report card again." Lily hesitated for only a moment before reaching into her bag and pulling it out. Mary held the card under the UV light, the ink glowing like a secret only they could see. The same words. "They see a student. I see my star, my daughter of sound. Come and we'll shine together, my love." Lily's breath came in sharp gasps as she read the words, her eyes wide with horror. He wrote this?" she whispered. Mary nodded, her throat tight. "The same way he wrote to Emily, the same promise, the same lie." She felt a surge of cold fury as she clicked the pen off, hiding it quickly in the folds of her skirt. "We can't stay here," she said softly but firmly. "We have what we need. We're going to the police, right now." But before she could stand, the door opened and Victor appeared in the doorway. His smile was polite, his posture relaxed, but Mary could see the flicker of curiosity in his eyes as he took in the way Lily clutched her report card to her chest. "I'm sorry for the delay," he said, stepping into the room. The last student took longer than expected. He looked at Lily, his expression softening. "Lily, I'd like to speak with you privately about your progress," he said, his voice calm and soothing. "Just a few minutes." Mary stood, her body tense. "She's not staying," she said, her voice as steady as she could make it. "We're leaving." Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Carter," he said. "But Lily's father asked me to push her, to help her reach her potential. He trusts me to do what's best for her." He reached out a hand to Lily, his fingers gentle but insistent. "Come, Lily," he said softly. "You've come so far already. Don't let fear hold you back now." Mary felt Lily's hand tremble beneath hers. She leaned closer, her voice a whisper only the girl could hear. "You don't have to go with him," she said. "You're not alone anymore." Lily drew a shaky breath, her eyes darting between Mary and Victor. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm done." Victor's smile faltered, the mask slipping for just a moment before he recovered. "As you wish," he said, his voice clipped. "But you're making a mistake." Mary didn't respond. She rose, her hands still wrapped around Lily's, and together they stepped past him into the hallway. She could feel his eyes on them as they walked, the weight of his gaze like a brand on her back. But she didn't look back. Outside, the bright afternoon light felt almost blinding after the shadows of Victor's house. Mary drew in a deep breath, her heart pounding. They had seen the truth, and now they had to make sure no one else would fall into the same trap. Mary and Lily stepped out into the cold spring air, the weight of their confrontation with Victor still clinging to their shoulders. The sky above was a pale, restless blue, clouds gathering like witnesses to their escape. Mary glanced over at Lily, the girl's face pale and drawn, but her eyes alive in a way they hadn't been when Mary first saw her in that lobby. "Are you okay?" Mary asked softly as they walked down the steps toward the car. Lily took a breath that shook in her chest. "I think so," she said, her voice small but steady. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear someone say it wasn't my fault." Mary nodded, her heart aching with understanding. "It never was." They reached the car, and as Mary fumbled with her keys, she caught a movement in the corner of her eye. The garage door to the house was open, the white van parked inside partially visible. The back window was covered by a large promotional poster, Victor in a tuxedo standing beside a young woman holding a violin. The text read, "Victor Lane and Amelia Dawson, Masters of Classical Harmony." Amelia Dawson. The name twisted something deep in Mary's gut. She stepped closer, squinting at the image. The woman looked young, too young to be an old collaborator of Victor's. But there was something about the slope of her shoulders, the tilt of her head. Lily stepped up beside her. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tight. Mary didn't answer. She moved closer to the garage, her eyes catching on something propped against the far wall. A violin. Not just any violin, but one with a rich, honeyed wood grain she would have recognized anywhere. A small scratch near the tailpiece, the one Emily had made when she was 9, so proud of her first competition performance. Her breath caught in her throat. "That's Emily's violin," she whispered. Lily's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Mary nodded, her hands balling into fists. "I'd know it anywhere." She stepped back, her mind racing. Emily was here. She had to be. The realization burned through her veins like fire. She turned to Lily, her voice low and urgent. "We have to call the police. Now." Lily swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'll do it," she said, pulling out her phone. Mary turned and hurried back to the car. She reached inside for the letters, her fingers brushing over the envelopes like a prayer. She would not let Victor Lane steal another child's music. She would not let him steal another childhood. As she clutched the letters to her chest, she looked back at the house. She could feel the darkness lurking there, the twisted promises and the stolen notes. But she would not be afraid. She had come for answers. She had come for justice. And now she knew the truth. Emily was alive, and she would not let her slip away again. The urgency of the moment spurred Mary into action. She and Lily didn't waste another second. Lily's hands were shaking as she dialed 911, her breath coming in short gasps. But she managed to get the words out. "My name is Lily Reed. We're at 47 Woodland Drive. We believe a missing girl is here. She's been held against her will." Mary could hear the dispatcher's calm, authoritative voice on the other end of the line, promising that officers were on their way. As soon as Lily hung up, Mary reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. Together, they turned back to the house. Mary's pulse pounded in her ears as she scanned the property. She could hear the faint strains of a cello drifting from an open window, music that once would have brought her comfort, but now only filled her with dread. She took a deep breath, bracing herself. Then, in a moment of instinct, she remembered the glucose tablets she always carried in her purse, an old habit from caring for Daniel and Emily, both diabetics. She slipped her hand into her bag, feeling the small container like a talisman of hope. She didn't know what she would find inside, but she refused to leave Emily, if Emily was indeed there, vulnerable. As they waited, the seconds stretched on unbearably. Every crackle of leaves in the wind, every creak of an old branch made Mary's heart leap. Finally, in the distance, she heard the wail of sirens, an electric crackle of hope piercing the air. She turned to Lily, and the girl's eyes shone with fear, but also something else: determination. "Stay close to me," Mary said. "We'll go together. If she's in there, we'll get her out." The first police car appeared at the top of the drive, lights flashing. An officer stepped out, his hand resting on his holster, scanning the property with practiced caution. Mary hurried forward. "She's in the garage," she said, her voice rising. "I saw her violin. It's hers, my daughter's, Emily Carter. She's alive. Please, you have to help her." The officer nodded, signaling his partner to move in. More sirens wailed in the distance as backup arrived, the flashing lights bathing the quiet neighborhood in red and blue. Mary stood back, her hands clenched around the letters as she watched the officers fan out across the lawn, their voices low and urgent over the radios. She felt Lily's hand slip into hers, and she held it tight. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, though she didn't know if she was reassuring Lily or herself. Minutes later, 2 officers emerged from the garage, carrying a young woman between them. Her head lolled against her chest, her face pale and waxen, but Mary recognized her instantly. Her heart stopped. "Emily," she breathed, the words slipping out on a sob. The officers laid her gently on the grass, one of them already checking her pulse and blood sugar. Mary dropped to her knees beside her daughter, her hands cupping Emily's face. "It's me, sweetheart. I'm here. I'm here." Emily's eyelids fluttered, her gaze unfocused. "Mom," she whispered, her voice no more than a breath. "I'm so tired." Tears streamed down Mary's face as she pulled the glucose tablets from her purse, gently slipping one into her daughter's mouth. "I know, baby, I know. Just hold on." Behind her, Lily stood frozen, her eyes wide as she watched the scene. "She's alive," she murmured. "Oh my God, she's alive." Mary looked up at her, her throat tight with emotion. "You helped save her, Lily. You didn't let him take you, and you didn't let him keep her." As paramedics arrived and lifted Emily onto a stretcher, Mary stood, her knees weak but her resolve strong. She would not leave her daughter's side. She would follow her to the hospital, to the ends of the earth if she had to. She reached back and took Lily's hand again. "Come with us," she said. "You're part of this now. You deserve to see this through." Together, they watched as the paramedics carried Emily away, her face already regaining a hint of color. And as the last of the police cars pulled out of the driveway, Victor Lane in the back seat of one, his face pale and set, Mary knew the darkness was finally beginning to lift. The ambulance doors closed with a decisive thunk, and for a moment, the world fell silent around Mary. She stood there, her fingers still curled around the last letter she'd found in Emily's violin, her knuckles white. The paramedics' voices were muffled inside the vehicle, but she watched as they checked her daughter's vitals, their calm, professional movements a fragile comfort in the chaos of her racing heart. Emily's face, still pale, but no longer the ghost she'd feared, was the first true sign of hope Mary had clung to in 15 years. She pressed her palm to the cold metal of the ambulance door, as if to anchor herself to the reality that this was happening. Emily was here, alive. Behind her, police officers led Victor Lane in handcuffs down the path to a waiting patrol car. His face was no longer the smooth, practiced mask she'd known in the academy halls. It was tight and pale, his eyes darting back to the house, as if he could somehow reclaim the twisted kingdom he'd built there. Mary felt a surge of cold fury rise in her chest. She stepped forward, her voice low and sharp as she spoke, though she knew he wouldn't meet her eyes. "You took everything from her," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "You stole her music, her childhood, and you turned it all into a prison." Victor didn't respond. He kept his head turned, staring at the ground, but she saw the faint twitch of his jaw, the only sign that her words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. Lily stood a few steps behind Mary, her violin case still clutched to her chest. She watched Victor with wide, haunted eyes. "He tried to make me just like her," she whispered. "He wanted me to be his next masterpiece." Mary turned to her and gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "But you're not," she said. "You broke free. You chose to be more than his obsession." As they watched the police car pull away, Mary's mind began to settle into the new reality taking shape around her. She could feel the threads of the past unraveling, no longer a snare around her throat, but a path back to something like healing. She thought of the music that had once filled their home, the soft strains of Emily's violin echoing in the small living room. For so long, she had wondered if she'd ever hear it again. Now, she could almost hear it in the breeze, a quiet promise of things that could be mended. She turned to Lily, her voice softer now. "You don't have to face any of this alone anymore," she said. "Emily will need time to heal, but so will you." Lily nodded, tears bright in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Mary smiled through her own tears. "Thank you for being brave," she said. "I couldn't have done this without you." As the last of the police cars disappeared down the street, Mary took one final look at the house, the ivy-clad walls that had hidden so much pain. She didn't feel fear anymore. She felt something else, something like freedom. Turning back to her car, she felt the soft weight of Emily's letters in her bag, the faded paper a testament to the truth she'd unearthed. And as she and Lily walked side by side to where Daniel waited by the car, his face drawn with worry and relief, she knew that they had reclaimed something precious from the darkness. The drive to the hospital was silent, but filled with a quiet intensity, the kind that comes when the worst is over. But the road to healing has only just begun. Mary kept glancing at Lily in the rearview mirror, the girl's expression still pale and worn, but her shoulders straighter than they'd been when they'd first met. The violin case was still in her lap, a symbol of what had almost been taken from her, but also of the music she'd refused to surrender. Daniel reached across from the passenger seat, his hand warm and grounding on Mary's shoulder. She drew a deep breath, her mind reeling from the enormity of what they'd found, of the girl they'd saved, and of the daughter they were bringing home. She felt her hands trembling, but she didn't try to stop them. She let the tears come, the relief and the fear and the fierce, aching love that had carried her through every step of this nightmare. When they arrived, the hospital doors parted with a soft sigh of warm air and antiseptic brightness. Nurses moved briskly, but their kindness shone in every glance and word. Emily lay in a quiet room, an IV in her arm, her face pale but no longer lost. Her eyes fluttered open as Mary stepped in, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. "Mom?" Emily's voice was a thread of sound, fragile and unsure. Mary's breath caught. She dropped to her knees beside the bed, her fingers tracing the familiar line of Emily's jaw. "It's me, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's me. I'm here." Emily blinked, her gaze searching Mary's face, as if to make sure this wasn't another of Victor's twisted illusions. Slowly, the uncertainty eased, and her lips curved in the faintest smile. I played for him," she said, her voice cracking. "He said if I played, I'd be safe." Mary's tears fell freely now, but she smiled through them, her voice fierce with love. "You don't have to play for him anymore," she said. "You only play for yourself, for your own music, your own soul. No one can take that away from you." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she reached for her mother's hand, her grip weak but determined. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she said. Mary leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You don't have to be," she promised. "We're here. We're not going anywhere." Lily stood in the doorway, watching the scene with quiet reverence. Daniel moved to stand beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You saved her," he said softly. "Don't ever forget that." Lily shook her head, her eyes shining. "No, she saved me too." Mary turned and met the girl's gaze, her own voice trembling but certain. "Then, let's all start again," she said. Together, outside the window, the late afternoon light streamed through the glass, painting the hospital room in warm gold. Mary looked out at it and felt a fragile hope blooming in her chest. The years that had been stolen from them could never be given back. But here, now, they had the chance to build something new. Emily lay back against the pillow, her breathing steady, her eyes soft with exhaustion. "Play with me, someday," she murmured. Mary smiled, her tears falling again. "Someday," she promised, "but only when you're ready." And in that small sunlit room, surrounded by the quiet hum of nurses and the weight of everything they had endured, Mary felt the first true notes of healing begin to play. Soft, hesitant, but real. The music was theirs again, and no twisted devotion, no haunting echo of the past could ever take it from them. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey through the shadows of memory and the quiet strength of a mother's love. In the echoes of Emily's violin, we found a story not only of pain and betrayal, but also of resilience and hope. As the final notes fade, we're left with a powerful reminder. No darkness is too deep to overcome when love leads the way. If this story moved you, please like, share, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections, maybe even a story of your own courage or someone you know. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales that dig deep into the hidden corners of the human heart. Until next time, take care of each other and keep listening for the music that brings us all home.